Well, we're looking at Bentley Arnage Green Label starter motors. Now the Green Label uses the BMW engine, and it's been tweaked by Cosworth Engineering, so things aren't all exactly the same. So the standard 4.4 BMW unit varies in different respects. And one of them is the starter motor, and that has something of an effect on the price, because all BMW parts are generally far better value than if they've got Bentley written on them. So my Bentley now is getting on a bit, and it gets the dreaded click sometimes when I try to start it, and obviously I need to take it apart, take the starter motor out, which is not that straightforward. It's a bit tricky to get to, and so I thought what I'll do is get a starter motor and make sure it's in good order and just swap them over, and then that gives me the option to work on the other one. And it's quite interesting to see BMW standards, really. So the first thing I did was bought a second-hand Arnage Green Label starter motor, which is this one. And the interesting thing immediately I thought was the stirrup system. The pivot and the stirrup are controlled by, well, they're plastic basically, and that's not quality. And the other thing I noticed was that the armature is pretty much encapsulated in there. Now these don't really go wrong. They just don't tend to get enough use to wear the brushes out. The brushes are on the comma down this end. And so I thought I'd look into it more, because if this starter motor is from a similar year, bearing in mind they only made them in, what, 98, 99, it's likely to be in a similar condition to the one that I've got. So I decided that I'd pull it apart and just see what the difference was between the BMW starter, the standard motor starter, and the Bentley one. And what Cosworth did was they moved the starter motor from under the number 2 bank and popped it under the number 1 bank, and presumably to make room for the turbos and all the other bits and pieces. Incidentally, the manifolds are cast aluminium on the Cosworth, not nasty BMW plastic on the standard I think it's M62 engine. So I thought, well, I'm not going to bolt this one on, although, you know, it's the advert said it was in good condition, but then everything is in good condition on eBay, supposedly. The motor part, nothing much goes wrong. You've just got a commutator and brushes. They don't really tend to cause problems. The problem comes from the solenoid, which is that part, and you have a low current pair of connections. One's there, and it pulls the solenoid in, and as the solenoid pulls in, it pushes the drive in to the flywheel, so when you press the button it goes click and puts that into mesh with the flywheel, and it also makes contacts, and these are the contacts. And sure enough, when I eventually got this apart, because it's not meant to come apart like all these BMW parts, they're not really that well constructed, I had to cut it. I had to cut this section off because it's just cast in, or really well glued in. You just have to unsolder a couple of joints and then attempt to get this one out, which well, I had to do it with violence. And sure enough, there's the contacts, and as you can see, there's corrosion present. One side generally is always reasonable, and that one, you know, as you can see, it's okay, but on the outgoing side, lots of corrosion, and it's that corrosion, particularly on damp sort of miserable days, that tends to cause high resistance, and that's when you get clicking, because there isn't enough power going through that contact, enough current going through that contact to actually drive the motor. It will click into place because you know, this is controlled by a low current pair of cables which go on those two connections there. So it drives in, you go click, but there's not enough power to send current through that copper to drive the motor, which does take a really hefty whack of current. So I bought this because it was Bentley. It cost me 250 quid delivered, and it was quite clear that this one wasn't going to be in much better condition than the one that's on the car, hence destroying it completely by taking it apart, which was worth the doing really, because I could see then that there was a problem, and what I needed was a new solenoid. And so I bought a brand new one, and this one here, Ridex, which is German, and it says exceptional value quality built to last, supreme performance, and it's produced for Ridex, Berlin, Germany. And it comes off an X5, which you know, uses the same M62 engine. Because they're getting on a bit, this one had a discount on it, and delivered it was 85 quid. Now if I want to get the proper Arnage one that goes under number 1 bank, it's going to cost me between 500 and 600 pounds. And what's the difference, you ask? Very little. Solenoids are the same, the motor is the same direction, all this is the same Bendix drive. The difference is in the casting at the top. So that one engages this way and that one engages that way. So it's gonna that casting is going to cost you 400 quid minimum. So what am I going to do? Well, all I needed was one of those, but this is a brand new unit. It cost me 85 quid delivered, and it's a heavy bit of kit, so the delivery is not cheap. And all I'll do is take those 2 screws out, take those 3 screws out, which are Torx screws, and I'll put that casting on that starter motor. So the key is, to anyone that's got a green label, do not replace the starter motor, or if you do, take the casting off, because that casting is worth 400 quid. So by taking off this casting off of a real Arnage spare and popping it on this one, I can save that amount of money. And what I'll do when I take the other one off, I might well do the same thing, because I was prepared to pay almost that kind of money just to buy the solenoid, you know, this part, which is really the only part that's got a problem with the connections. And that you find on all older cars. You know, people just change the starters if it's cheap enough, but on a Bentley, you know, you just treble the price because of the name. So okay, I had to buy that one for 250 quid, but then I was interested to go through it and just see what the differences were, and basically they were next to nothing. And this one was heavily discounted, and I couldn't believe Just couldn't believe it. 85 quid. And it does seem to be in pretty good nick. Now, as I say, this is the genuine BMW item, and I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed with the way it's pressed together along here. You can't get it to bits, really. Unlike the old Lucas ones that everyone slags off. On a Lucas, you could take every single part off, clean up the contacts and put it back on, which is what I've done with one of my older cars in the garage. So there you go. How to save yourself 400 quid. Keep the old starter motor, take the casting off, buy an X5 starter, change over those sections. 3 screws there, 2 screws there, job done. So my next job is to change over that, and then when I've got a minute and I'm not in a rush, I shall take the old starter out and just pop that one, which is will be effectively a brand new unit. But I might just clean up this casting first, because that looks better than that. Okay, I think that'll do.